One of the nation's best loved childhood treats and a winner with me is gingerbread, but it's undergone a transformation over the past 500 years or so. In his Yorkshire kitchen cum food laboratory, Gerard Baker reveals a very different sweet indulgence our medieval ancestors enjoyed.
If you ask most people what comes to mind when you ask them about their childhood baking, the chances are the first thing they'll remember is the gingerbread man.
It may be the runaway treat of fairy tales, but gingerbread hasn't always been for children. Recipes in the Middle Ages were unrecognisable from what we know and love today, but at their heart is the same special ingredient.
So there's one thing that's common to all gingerbreads, be it the gingerbread man or the earliest gingerbread recipes, and that's this stuff, root ginger. Root ginger is an Asian plant, essentially, but it no longer exists in the wild. And that gives us a clue that it's been around in common use for centuries. And in fact, it came first to the British kitchen in the 12th century.
Ginger was one of the many herbs and spices brought back to Europe by returning crusaders, enriching Western cooking.
It was used in powdered form alongside pepper as one of our most common seasonings. It was only later, in the 13th and 14th centuries, that we begin to see the first recipes for what we might think an early gingerbread.
Gerard's going to make a recipe from the 15th century, unlike any around today. Ginger was incredibly expensive, so this dish was only available to the wealthiest.
Now, there are very few ingredients in an early gingerbread. Honey as a source of sweetness, stale breadcrumbs which provided the bulk of the gingerbread, and of course ground ginger, the spice, which was the form that most ginger would have been imported as. Start off with the honey. We don't need to use fresh breadcrumbs because, of course, stale breadcrumbs are a byproduct of every kitchen, and it was a really good way of using up something to make a new dish. And then the ginger itself, which has the benefit of also being a preservative.
Most medieval cooking was done over an open fire, so rather than being baked like modern gingerbread, it was heated in a pan.
But it cooks very quickly as the bread thickens the mixture.
So why did this aristocratic snack become people-shaped? Supposedly it was none other than Queen Elizabeth who gave us the first gingerbread men, which she had baked in the likeness of courtly visitors and presented as gifts.
So it's ironic, really, that what was a courtly treat in the form of an early gingerbread became the food of the nation's children, the nation's childhood treat. And that started to take place largely in the 17th and 18th century, when annual fairs that were held around the country, agricultural fairs if you like, saw an increasingly large variety of cakes and biscuits being sold as treats for children. That largely came about as a result of the cheapness of sugar as the trade from the West Indies increased. Now this looks like it's nearly ready now. It's still soft enough to put into the mould. Now this is a set and not a baked gingerbread, and it takes 2 or 3 days to firm up. Not the ideal thing if you've got a lot of hungry and expectant children waiting at the kitchen table for a treat. So I just need to press the surface of the gingerbread with dampened fingers to smooth it into the mould. And then I can leave it in a warm, dry place to set. Now that'll take 2 or 3 days to dry and become firm enough to cut, but fortunately, because there's a bit of a kid in me, I made one earlier so I could try. I shall have a taste. And for me, it's just a perfect combination of honey and spice. What a treat.
When I think about the food